Okay, we're on. Uh, right now we have a high quality but low quantity audience, and that's fine. We can deal with that. Let's begin with a prayer as we usually do. Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and upon those in the tombs bestowing life. Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and upon those in the tombs bestowing life. Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and upon those in the tombs bestowing life. It's actually an interesting practice that the Orthodox have of saying that short prayer 3 times in place of O Heavenly King during this time of Pentecost. And Pentecost goes from Pascha until Pentecost, those 50 days. Yeah, so it's an interesting little practice that we have, and I think a good one, because it reminds us, the most important thing that we are is people of the resurrection, people of Christ's resurrection, and then hopefully people of hope. I think the resurrection really breeds hope. So first announcement, a new baby in the parish, Anfisa. Anfisa, it's an interesting female name, very, very old name. Almost never hear it, but very interesting. Last name is Parker. And folks may remember little Aaron and his dad, Big Aaron, who's the dad also of Anfisa and our parishioner, Alexandra Kandakova. So that is exciting, and we'll be moving her away from the women who are pregnant prayer list to getting ready for baptism of baby. Another kind of logistical thing, Wednesday's liturgy is at 7 o'clock this week, because it's Father Collins' kind of secondary names day, and he wants to serve, but he still needs to get to work. So we'll start right at 7, probably hours even before that. So liturgy at 7, that means out the door 8:15, probably something like that, 8:30 at the latest. And then Saturday's an all English cycle. Saturday liturgy is an all English cycle. So that's a good one for those who are kind of interested, would like to see what's going on, but still want to go to their church on Sunday. That Saturday is a really good one for that. So I wanted to say a few things about the Sunday of the Myrrh-bearing Women that we celebrated yesterday. And at the risk of sort of retelling the sermon, which I don't think is useful, I do think that it's good for us to remember really the boldness, the fearlessness of the women, and how they trusted God that they were going to be able to do what they needed to do, even though from a logical perspective, there's no way they were going to do that with a Roman watch of troops sitting there guarding Christ's grave. But they trusted in the Lord that he would find a way for them to do that. And they did their part by laboring, and they trusted in his blessing, and it worked. And that's what we have to do within reason. As I mentioned yesterday, jumping from the plane without a parachute and asking the Lord to save us is not very wise. But there are some times when we have to do things that seem pretty darn difficult, but with God's help, anything is possible. So it reminds us of that, and I think that's a good reminder. We need that reminder, and that persistence, especially that Mary Magdalene showed, of not leaving the grave until she saw Christ. I think this is good for us too. So anyway, it's a great day. Really love that day, and those are some important virtues for us to think about. I mentioned also, I think in the sermon, maybe it was at the end of the service, that the Saturday evening vigil is kind of replete with the myrrh-bearing women. We see them a lot in the 11 resurrectional gospels that are read on Saturday nights on a rotating basis. So on the Sunday after Pentecost, we just start with the first one, and we kind of go through to the 11th, and then on that 12th week, we go back to the first one. And there's one from Matthew, 2 from Mark. There are 3 from Luke, and 5 from St. John the Divine, from St. John the Theologian. So anyway, very interesting practice that the church has, and I think very important one as well. We're continuing to work on our school, and I think that's important. I got a call actually from someone from St. Louis asking about a school, how to start a school, so on and so forth, an Orthodox school. I think this is a real movement, and we're kind of on the very early end of that. But I see this growing and growing in our parishes, and I think that's something very exciting. And we're encouraging people to get those yard signs out there so folks will know about the school, and putting up posters, the posters that we have at the church for free, that people can take and put up at their place of work, or at the grocery store, in the library, coffee shop, whatever. So I think that's very important. I also wanted to share some information, which I think is good and positive, that we'll be starting services in West Branch, Michigan this summer. We have people in West Branch, we have people in Gladwin, we have people in Houghton Lake. And so we're going to start having services once a month in West Branch, June, July, August, and kind of see where that goes. God willing, it'll continue to go, and we will grow from there. This is how we started in Mackinac City, and thank God things have really taken off there. I think I probably mentioned to the parish, but maybe I didn't, that there were 40 people at their feast day, which was a weekday in December. And that's really impressive for their first feast day ever. So anyway, we're starting West Branch, and that's something very exciting. We had parish council yesterday, and also festival committee meeting, and festival is going on September 21st and 22nd. We'll have a save the date out there pretty quickly so people can start sharing that. It's already on Facebook and it's on our festival website, but we'll do some kind of flyer also so that folks can share. And we hope that everybody will tell everybody, and we'll have a great festival again this year. Our new church project looks like groundbreaking is going to be August. We thought that we could get it done in July, but there's just no way to do that. This is not a St. Vladimir's thing. This is dealing with all the county, and well, it's a county issue right now. It's the township has been super supportive, and it's not that the county's not, but they want some more proof about traffic flow issues that might come from having a bigger church. So that's fine. It's just one of those things. And it looks like we'll groundbreak in August, but that should not keep us from doing what we had planned to do this year. So everything from that point of view is still on track. We have new bandwidth coming to the church. We should be able to easily use YouTube or anything else, essentially, that we want to. We've been dealing with satellite internet for a lot of years, and now we're going to have fiber optic. So we kind of are going from the Model T right to the Tesla truck in one big jump. And that makes us think about how we can prepare to share the services and the life of our parish with those who are outside the parish. We don't think that just like flipping on a camera and showing the service is we think we can do better than that. And so we're seeking people's input. So if you have thoughts, please share those. Really would like to know what people think and how we can sort of reinvent this or kind of do this better. Than just turning on the camera. So feedback is very welcome. We've got a new cupola going on up on the church before St. Vladimir's Day. We're going to be leafing that. And so it should be quite beautiful. And we want to have a few people who learn how to do the leafing so that we can then leaf the big one, which is over the altar. It needs to be done. We really want to see that done before the snow flies. And we need some people who know how to put on leaf, like gold leaf. It won't be gold though, it'll be silver. In any case, those who are interested should see me. And we need a tractor. So we realize that we need on the parish land, not just a truck, which we have now, but really we need a tractor. So if anybody's got an extra one laying around or knows somebody who does, please let us know. Okay, so let's open up things. That was my little preamble, let's say. Let's open it up to questions. Okay, let's see. I see my dad would like to hear about the Orthodox view of heaven. You don't need to speak on it. No, I think that's a really great question, actually. Oops, I see. For me, I am locked. So let me do that, and then usually I come back after that. Let's see if I come back. Boy, we're having some real troubles with our Google today. I think we're frozen. Yep. All right, I'm back. I saw the question about the Orthodox view of heaven. Sorry, my Google Chrome is really fighting today. So okay, let's talk about the Orthodox view of heaven. So I think it's easiest to understand this if we are thinking about the Orthodox view of the entirety of the next life. This way, yeah, because the next logical question then is, well, what is hell then? So let's just talk about it all at once. The thing about God is he created man to share his love with mankind. Some say that that's because a portion of the angelic world revolted against him and were cast down into hell. But that's not necessarily the reason. It may just be that God decided that he wanted to create man after he had created angels. So I don't think we can say that that's absolutely the case, but that's an interesting thing to think about. The point is, God having created mankind to share his love with him means that he didn't create mankind to throw him into hell. God is not looking for technicalities that will keep us out of the heavenly kingdom. And in fact, he loved us enough that he sent his only son to straighten us out when we kind of went astray. So I think that we don't have to work too hard to show that that's the case, that God loves man and that's why he created him and he wants to share heaven with him. In this life, we choose. Are we going to be with God or we are not? And I think that that's really wonderful. The fact that it's not a random sort of lottery. We use free will, and God gives us free will to love him, or we don't. And so when we go to the next life, if we've chosen to follow God, to live in the church that he gave us for our salvation, to strive to be his children, then we will experience, okay, let's put this a different way. Those who have chosen to love God, to live in his church, those who have chosen to be with God, in the next life, when they are there, they will experience God's presence, that light of the transfiguration on Mount Tabor. They will experience that light as warmth and love and comfort. Those who chose not to be with God in this world, in this life, will experience that same light. Everyone gets the same. Everyone gets the same thing. It's not the Bugs Bunny hell where you have the little demons poking people with pitchforks. That's not the way it is. Everyone gets the same thing. But to those who chose not to pursue God, who ran from God, that light will be fire. They will experience that as fire and pain. Whereas those who chose to be with God will experience that same light as warmth and love and comfort. And so this is how the church understands heaven. This is from the teachings of Christ, the gospel, so on and so forth. This is how we understand what the next life will be like. It's very much not a carnal concept of heaven, as opposed to, let's say, Islam, which is about the virgins and the endless feasting and all that stuff. Completely the opposite. It's a completely spiritual understanding of what life is in the next life. And it's hard for us to grasp that completely, but we do get some foreshadowing of that in our lives in the church, I would say, for the most part. We're at church, we experience a beautiful service, something maybe the choir sings, or something that we hear in the gospel or in the epistle, or sometimes in the Old Testament readings when it's read. And it really touches us. We feel that warmth, that love of God. And that's just a slight, small, tiny foreshadowing of what the heavenly kingdom will be. So it's maximally spiritual. It's not at all carnal. And it's something that we will be completely satisfied and happy and joyous experiencing. A question people often ask, will I be with my family? And we have to be honest. First of all, there are certain things about the next life that we don't know. In fact, a lot of things about the next life that we don't know. But we do understand that we will know the people that we knew here. We will know who they are. They will know who we are. We will have some kind of a relationship which we don't really understand completely. So the answer is yes. As far as we understand, we will know those that we knew here. But how that relationship will work in the next life, we don't know. And that's okay. We can be at peace with not knowing some things. This is part and parcel of being an Orthodox Christian. There are mysteries, and it's okay if we don't know every single thing. The Lord taught us what it is that we need for our salvation. And that's what the scriptures are about. That's what the tradition of the church is about. The Lord taught us what we need for our salvation. and other things that he didn't teach us, it means that we don't necessarily need that. And that's okay to know that. I mean, that we don't need to know everything. It's nice to be curious, and it's good to talk. It's sometimes good to talk about hypothetical things, but the Lord gave us what we need for our salvation. And if we take that and we're thankful for it, then we will indeed attain that salvation. So I hope that answers the question. It was a little more maybe than you were looking for, but I hope that context helps to make it useful. Okay. Any other questions? I want to see if anyone asks questions in writing. Sometimes they do that. Pop open. Right now, here that you sent another. Okay, you're very welcome. I'm glad that that's useful. No, nobody asked a question, but you know what? There are good questions here. So I may ask actually some of those. I may answer some of those questions so we can talk about them. Oh, we covered that already. That's interesting. That's an interesting question. Someone asked, this was some months ago, but I think we could revisit it, about icons. You know, it's an interesting question, I think, because in the West, icons are not prominent. It's not that they don't exist, they do. And we could even say that some, even Calvinist traditions, like Presbyterianism, they kind of use light as iconography. Like they tend to be not nearly as maximal in iconography as the Orthodox, and the Catholics tend to use statues, although in our days a lot less, and you might be more likely even to see an icon in a Catholic church than you would see a statue, and a new one anyway. But in any case, sometimes people ask questions about icons because it's just a little bit foreign to folks who grew up in the West. So I think that on one hand we can talk about that ad nauseum, but who wants to get to nauseum, right? I think that it's better sometimes to have a simple thing to understand this. And if we understand icons as a window to heaven, like that we are the person that we see in the icon, whether that be Christ or one of the saints, that's a person in the heavenly kingdom. And that's the point of the halo around their head, right? That's the reflection of the light of the transfiguration. It shows that they've attained sainthood, that they've been sanctified. So if we think of icons as windows to heaven, that can often be just a very easy way for us to understand that, okay, we're depicting this person who is in heaven, and we are showing respect to that person. Now, sometimes we can get confused, and we shouldn't. We only pray to God. We don't pray to saints. We only pray to God. We do ask the saints for their intercessions before the throne of God, because we understand that they are there, and we understand that they hear us. And so we ask them to pray to God for us, but we only pray to God. And I think that that's an important point also for people, especially as folks are coming to the church, to understand. We are not violating any commandments in this way. And of course, in the Old Testament, the temple and the tabernacle that the Jews carried with them, that tent that they used for worship, of course, that had iconography in it. It had seraphim. It had all kinds of things in it. So the sort of concept that there are no religious images in the church is completely foreign to Orthodoxy, because it was foreign to the Old Testament people. And when people became Christians, they just continued with that understanding. Although iconography sort of developed a little bit more, I would say, in the New Testament than in the Old Testament. And you see pictures of Jesus Christ in Protestant churches and so on and so forth. But because the Orthodox, the people of the East, were especially allergic to emperor worship and the sort of cult of the emperor's statue and burning incense at the feet of that and so on and so forth, so many Orthodox people lost their lives refusing to participate in this kind of pagan undertaking. They just became very, very allergic to a third dimension in art, and therefore we just don't have, for the most part, statues inside churches. Sometimes you see them on the outside of churches, but as far as in worship, we tend to be quite two-dimensional as far as our artistic depictions, and that's why our icons are like that. So I hope that's helpful too. All right, so I wonder if there are any other questions, and if there are, I will be happy to take them. But the things that I sort of prepared, I was able to cover here. I'll look at those old questions one more time and see if anything jumps out. Ooh, that's a good one. How does one cultivate humility? That's a big one. And I think the way that we begin that is by striving to accept God's will. You know, the things that we can't control. We should control the things that we can control. If God gave us control of them, it means that we'll answer if we don't control them, right? He gave us a gift. If we throw it away, we'll have to answer for that. Well, we'll answer for it either way. So we should prepare a good answer by controlling the things that he gave us control over. But the humility and peace, which are very closely connected, come from accepting what the Lord sends that we can't control. That flat tire, or for me today, the hose. I have no idea how a hose could be looks so nice, coiled up on the side of the house, and you take it down and it's got like 1,000 knots in it. And just don't understand that. And I failed to be humble about that because I got frustrated. And so these are the things that if I could say, well, you know what, Lord, I guess that's for my salvation. I just need to be patient and untie these knots. I had to untie them anyway, so why complain about them? But this is, I think, our real struggle, is that we accept what the Lord is giving us that we can't control. Things we can control, we should. And the things that we can't, we should be at peace with and ask God's help to be at peace with those. So this is how we begin to cultivate humility, is by accepting what we can't control. We can't control it anyway, so we might as well accept it. And if we begin to do that, we begin to have some peace around those things, and we begin to cultivate some real humility in the way that we live our lives. That's important because very few of us are going to go marching in to the heavenly kingdom with the bells ringing and the angels singing, and as these most righteous people who just live such wonderful and perfect lives. We will, I think, if we can attain the heavenly kingdom, it will be mostly through humility. Not because we were so righteous, but because we repented when we fell. And the fathers say that this life is given to us for repentance. So humility is a really big step in that direction. So something to think about, something to ponder on this late spring or early summer night. All right, so that's probably enough gibber jabber from me. If there's any other questions, I'll take those. Okay, once saved, always saved. Salvation. Okay, that's a great question. Can you speak on once saved, always saved, and working out your salvation? So there was never a concept of once saved, always saved in the church until the Protestant Reformation. That's a completely Reformation thing. And to be honest, it is a part of the Protestant world now. Those Protestants, especially maybe Anglicans, who would have retained a little bit more of their Catholic life for centuries, actually, they wouldn't have accepted that just without question. Whereas in Central Europe, in Germany and Switzerland and so on and so forth, that I think was pretty common and pretty accepted. But it is a new concept. In the Orthodox Church, we've always understood that salvation is a process. It's not something that happens in an instant. Yes, it's true that there are instances of martyrs, for instance, confessing Christ. Maybe they were pagans or something else. A lot of times this happened with the executioners. who were killing Christians. A lot of times, seeing the Christians gladly go to their deaths, knowing that they were going to attain the heavenly kingdom. Many times, we read in the lives of the saints, many times the executioners themselves confessed that they were Christians, even if they really maybe didn't know what that was. They wanted what those people had. They wanted what those people had, and so they confessed themselves Christians, and they were baptized in their own blood. Because usually when someone like that confessed Christ, they were immediately killed. There was no trial. There was no nothing. Not that the trial was meant to be a trial of like balancing justice. It was just trying to get Christians to renounce Christianity. But those guys who worked for the persecutors, they generally were killed immediately. And it's a lot of the lives of the saints we read about that. So yeah, that's an instance. What's so an instant? So okay, that happens, but that's the exception. Obviously, that's not the rule. What's interesting is what was happening in Christendom, in the Christian world, when the Protestant Reformation took place. Yes, there were these indulgences from the Catholic Church, and there were a lot of abuses, and so on and so forth. And so it's understandable that the people revolted. But what else was happening? There was great pressure on the Christian world from Islam. We don't think about that a lot as American Christians, because it was never really part of our experience. But huge swaths of Europe were under siege, under attack. Christians were being let off as slaves. I mean, this was something that began, of course, at the 6th century. That was more in the Middle East, but got to Europe in the 7th and 8th centuries. By the 8th century, Islam controlled 75% of modern day Spain. We don't even think about that. Plus, they were attacking from the east and the south. I mean, this was on people's minds, and this was a big deal. This was a big problem. And the reason that I am talking about Islam now is, where did this idea of once saved, always saved come from? Did it come from Islam? Because that's a Muslim thing. You say the Shahada, you're done. I mean, you have to live a life as a Muslim, but there's not even there's no baptism, there's no nothing. They don't have anything like that. When a child is born, the father whispers that formula about Allah and about Muhammad in his ear, and he's a Muslim. Now, you can live as a better Muslim or a worse Muslim, but you're a Muslim. And I can't prove it, but I would be willing to bet a decent amount of money that the idea of once saved, always saved coming out in the Protestant Reformation actually comes from this pressure of Islam and people having Islam on their minds. And, people learning about Islam. By that time, they understood the theology of Islam pretty well. Of course, in the beginning, they didn't. But by that time, of course, we're talking around 1600, 1500, 1600, they understood Islam very well, and they understood what that was. And so maybe, and I would say probably more than maybe, that's probably where that comes from. At least to me, I think that's a really good argument. So others could argue against it. But what we can say is that was never known in Christianity before that. That was definitely a novel theological idea, and came about in the Reformation only. So for us as Orthodox Christians, salvation is a process. Salvation is a process. It begins with our baptism. We're baptized based on the faith of our sponsors and our parents, understanding that a child needs to be reared in God if they're going to live in God as an adult. There was a time, a very short time, although a lot of saints came from this time, but a very short time in the history of the church when only adult baptism was practiced in the Orthodox Church. Less than 100 years, but it covered the interesting saints of St. Gregory Theologian, St. Basil the Great. By St. John Chrysostom time, there was already infant baptism was back. and it never wavered again. But there was that time right after the Christianity became legal, when adult baptism was practiced. And it gave us some of our greatest saints, interestingly. But in any case, that was before that. It was infant baptism was practiced, and especially after that, infant baptism was practiced. So it begins there, and it goes through our whole lives. And the fathers tell us that we have to fight until our last breath. That we will be tempted until the moment we leave this earth to go away from Christ. And so we have to practice our religion. It's a nice, it's a really nice American saying. We have to practice our religion, because there will be times, especially when we get older, when we get sick, when it won't be that easy to live our religion, and we need to practice so that we're strong, so that when that time comes of challenge, whether that's persecution, which is unlikely, but happens occasionally, or sickness, or old age, or whatever it is, we've practiced enough that we already know how to play, and we know how to live as a Christian, even if we can't live so actively because of our sickness or our age or whatever that is. So anyway, I hope that's helpful. Okay, so I'll give you a minute. You're welcome. Was there anything else that you wanted to cover tonight while we're all together? I'll give you a minute. I know you're typing, so. Well, I don't know you're typing, but I know you've typed so far. Okay, we'll go one more minute, and then if you don't have another question, which is fine, we will say good night. Okay. Were the reformers more hostile toward the Roman Catholics or Orthodox? Okay, sorry, I missed that. Somebody had sent me a note I needed to answer. So this is a really interesting question. They realized that there were these Orthodox people, and they were like, okay, you don't like Catholics and we don't like Catholics, so maybe we'll get together. And there is preserved the correspondence between Luther and the Patriarch of Constantinople, where Luther sort of said, okay, this is what we're about, and we think that you should join us, because you've also shown that you're not excited about Roman Catholics. I think there were 3 letters or 4, something like that. There was a lot of talking past each other, mostly from Luther's side, but I think there was probably some from the Orthodox side also. Um, but I think, strictly speaking, the reformers, they didn't know about Orthodoxy, and there was no real, there was no context to that. They didn't really understand Orthodoxy, except it wasn't Roman Catholicism, but it was Christianity, and it had been around for a long time. So it's kind of fun to read those letters. I mean, I've read them a few times, but yeah, they tried to kind of, the reformers said, "Hey, join us," and the Orthodox said, "We're okay as we are," and that's kind of where it went. So everything was focused on Roman Catholicism. Right. And I've read some authors who make the argument that the first generation you could call reformers, and then after that, they become Protestants, they protest. It's interesting. It's an interesting idea. And I think that it's not a clean, it's really not clean, because some of the first generation also got really radicalized, but the second were quite radicalized, Zwingli and people like that. So I mean, you can make the argument. It's not a bad argument. I've even made the argument in an academic paper before, because it fit with the point I was trying to make. But I couched it in that, some people say this, some people say that. But yeah, I think the reformers really didn't know much about Orthodox. They knew that we existed, but that was about all. And so they really were focused on Roman Catholicism, because that's where they came from, and that was what they were protesting, were the extremes that were happening there, mostly about indulgences, but there were other issues also. So yeah, we were just really tangentially there, and they never really expressed an issue with us, but I think because they really didn't know who we were. So good question. If you want to see that that back and forth between Luther and the Patriarch of Constantinople, I can send you the link. Good. Any other things that you'd like to talk about while we're together? I'll wait a minute to give you a second to type if you are typing. Okay. Okay, I'll send you that link and offline. And thanks for all the good questions. So let's say good night. Let's pray. During the Pentecost time, we, in place of "It is truly meet," which is the usual sort of closing prayer for these sorts of things, we say "Shine, shine, O New Jerusalem." This is from the Paschal service, and we sing it all throughout this Paschal period, just as we sing Christ is risen throughout the Paschal period. Shine, shine, O New Jerusalem, for the glory of the Lord is risen upon thee. Dance now and be glad, O Zion, and do thou exalt the most pure Theotokos in the arising of him whom thou didst bear. Thank you very much. Have a great night. See you soon.